Welcome everyone for this new episode of Be Invincible podcast. This is episode number 4, and we have Nancy with here today. She's the founder of Own Your Purpose LLC, and she's an independent executive director for Maxwell Leadership. Right? She's a certified coach, trainer, business engagement strategist, and a relationship management expert. And I think really am excited to have her on our show today. And I would request Nancy, why don't you just tell us about yourself?
Of course. Thanks so much for having me. So my name is Nancy Ouellette. As you mentioned, I have been really in the corporate world for 25 plus years. I grew up in southern West Virginia, which is a very rural part of the United States. And so growing up, I said I needed to jump up and break out of the shell and move to the city. And so I live on the eastern coast of the US right now. Um, I have two wonderful children, a 9 and 11-year-old, and I've been married and with my husband now for 20 years. But I've been working in the business, like I said, for a little bit more than 25 years. I started off in corporate finance. It transitioned really into the technology space, which is a lot of my passion. But throughout my career, I realized the one thing that stood out the most that I like to do is to develop people. And so several years ago, I decided to not jump out of technology or finance, but just evolve what I was doing within that space. And that space really became known as kind of more of that relationship development area. It became something really nice for me on the coaching side, where I realized people needed help in that space. And so I decided to build my own business, which I've now been doing going on close to a decade. It's been quite successful for me, just growing and learning and developing people throughout. So it's been a really nice run.
So, yeah, I think this is really great. So, you talk about leadership a lot, right? So, can you share some insights on different leadership styles and how leaders can identify and develop their own unique style to become more effective?
Wow, absolutely. I love leadership development. It's probably my most favorite topic, but this is a very complex question.
Yeah.
Um, there's so many different styles to leadership. But when I think of it, to simplify, there's kind of two things. I think one extreme versus the other. So I'm going to talk in extremes first, and then I'll certainly expose you to the different high level types and styles that bring into that. And so I like to look at there's dictatorial leadership, right? So there's definitely the type of people out there who like to tell you what to do, how to do it. And then there's the other side of that spectrum, which is really servanthood. And these are the people who listen and receive and do and help to support other people. So, and you see this in world leaders, you see it in our home life. There's usually somebody that takes charge over the other person. And then there's also usually the submissive person that will say, okay, just tell me what needs to be done and I'll support you and I'll support what needs to be done. And so when we think about leadership, yes, there's these two big extremes, but there are certainly different styles that can come out of that. And we'll look at those kind of like as ingredients. So what you really need to think about with leadership is what kind you want to be. And so fundamentally, I'll cover them in two major buckets.
Mhm.
There's kind of the fundamental styles, which are more transformational. A lot of people are used to that buzzword, but these are the folks that are kind of inspirational. They're the ones who motivate us to really get going. So we're looking to drive change. And then there's authoritative. Authoritative leadership style is more of like, I am mission, vision, purpose driven. This is what we are targeting to do. There's also delegative. These are the individuals that like to just they like to give authority out to other people. They grant autonomy and they say, go and do this. So those folks are your delegative style of leaders. And then there's democratic. These are the individuals who like to collaborate, gather consensus before they You see this a lot with European countries. So you may see this also in India and abroad, where it's more like a consensus based type of environment. And then there's transactional. I will do and I will perform and I will support you based off of rewards and
Mhm.
also punishments and also consequences as a result of those. So you can start to see when you think about these fundamental styles, how if you are a dictatorial or a servant, you kind of have to pick one side or the other. And it's really hard to have a maintained balance. So when you meet an individual that's exhibiting, they're not mutually exclusive. You will see some of these characteristics and styles come out in all different individuals, and they may have, like I said, one or many or all of these characteristics, just in a different level or extreme of that. So then there's also secondary characteristics. These can be situational leaders, people who adapt to the change. So they see a change coming, they can envision it. And so these are based off the circumstance type leaders. What do they do there?
Mhm.
Then there's goal oriented, which are your strategic folks. There's the coaching style of leadership, which I absolutely love. These are the people who try to bring out the best in you and identify through mentoring styles and developing others to help them see their success.
Mhm.
Everybody's familiar with bureaucratic. So bureaucratic is certainly in there as well, as far as rules, policies. And then there's pace setting. There's a pace setting leader who sets and drives expectations to where you want to go. So I would look at all of these as different ingredients, if you will, to the various types of leaderships. I look at them more as characteristics than I do necessarily styles, because you can carry one or more or many of these versus one or the other. But I think overall, that's kind of the different styles of leadership. How you identify what kind of leader you want to be is really crucial, I feel. And you kind of know a little bit of your strengths and weaknesses to start, but you have to decide, are you going to be the person that you want people looking to and reporting to and looking up to just because of your title?
Right.
Um, or do you want to be that person that they look at to really partner with because they respect you and they admire and they look up to you? And I think that's really what you need to ask yourself in determining how much or how little of each of those different characteristics you pepper in to your leadership soup, if you will,
Mhm.
on what are you going to be and what style of leader do you want to be? And there's certainly those that are in the middle. That also, right, there's different extremes to this. So do you want to just be a manager or leader in the world or in your family life who just looks for results?
Mhm.
You're a results-oriented person, or are you the type that you want to develop and lead people? And so it comes down to personal values, in my opinion, on where you want to fit,
Right.
you know, and so I try to start at that high level of, are you going to want to tell people what to do? Or are you going to want to help them achieve what you need done? So ask that question first.
Mhm.
Once you get an answer to that question, then you start to gauge across these different other types of styles, where do you want to fit? And how much do you want to invest in where to become that leader you want to be?
Right. Yeah, I think this is something very important for us to understand. I think people don't even know which kind of leadership style they have or they want to be, right? So, according to you and with your experiences, what are the common challenges people have when they want to grow as leaders, right? So, it's very important for everyone to know how should they grow as a leader. What is your perspective about it?
So growing as a leader, I think comes down to two major things. Um, and I personally have experienced this in my life, so I can attest to this. Um, Insecurity
Mhm.
is a really big piece of whether or not a person can actually grow as a leader. And it really stems largely from negative self-talk. So if you tell yourself you've got what it takes,
Mhm.
you can get it. If you sit there and tell yourself, I'm not really sure, or I'm not positive how to go about it, you probably won't. And so it starts with insecurity, and it's not just your own insecurity. So if you look at where you are, household security is one thing, right? So you can be a leader in your home, and that's kind of a given title, right? But when you go into the workplace and you translate it to that setting, you might have your own insecurities.
Right.
But then also, where do you want to go? If you want to go up, then the people above you likely have their own insecurities. So you need to always ask yourself, is the person here that I would potentially look to replace or look to have mentor me to
Right.
move me into the next stage in my career, do they have the capacity, willingness, and desire to help me do that? Do they have their own level of insecurities that are going to hold you back ultimately? So I think insecurity is absolutely one of the first things that people need to look into for themselves and ask, do I have the ability up
Mhm.
here? And if you don't, this is the type of people who generally do seek out support through coaching and mentorship and advice of others to help lift them up. The other piece really stems into the insecurity of others, which is ceilings. You hear this often phrased, the glass ceiling, and women a lot of times face and bump up into this, but so do men. It's not specific to any one particular gender or culture necessarily, but you hit ceilings. When
Yeah.
you think of an industry, there's some out there where maybe it's a male dominated industry and maybe those people have been in those positions 25, 30, 40 years. You see that a lot in manufacturing. They
Right.
don't leave. They don't leave. And so where do you go? So you're going to be prohibited from moving either from your insecurity, someone else's insecurity, or the ceiling. So when you're taking roles in an organization, you should always look and see what are the options. If you are a growing type of an individual, where
Mhm.
can you go? What are the limits? What is the threshold of growth here? And ask, is this a growing culture? Is it one where they would support me
Mhm.
if I want to develop and grow, whether it's up or sideways?
True. I think you talked about women. Mostly, I've seen that this particular gender has a lot of limitations and maybe multiple roles to drive their own life. For example, they work at office. They have to, in India, mostly they have a lot of responsibilities, right? They have to maintain the house, take care of the children, work, right, and also support the financial dependencies with the spouse. What do you think that women employees or people who are working, they should build a mindset, and how should they remove the roadblocks that can help them grow as a leader? What do you think that they should do in them? I think mostly it's mindset driven, but what
Mhm.
within mindset they should build to grow as a leader?
Yeah. Well, since you ask about women to start, I will say, one of the things women do, and we just naturally do this, it's inherent in who we are, is there is a negative self-talk that goes on. We are very guilty of it. And so, yes, a large part of it does stem from mindset and the way that you break through that. Um, there is a lot of positive self-talk that we need to start with. So women who are struggling with all of these different variables in their life saying, "Ugh, I can't do anymore. I can't take on anymore. I can't grow myself because I'm stuck," or whatever the situation may be. It is I can do this, and here's what I'm going to start doing to make this happen for myself. But the one challenge I think a lot of people are up is they do only look at themselves for that help. And it's not just you. So I think in the home setting in particular, it's very important to be surrounded by people in your home to
Right.
start. And always has to fundamentally start at home, in my opinion, whether it's leadership at home or in the office. It must start at home, where you are surrounded by the people who will tell you, "Hey, that was a fantastic dinner," or "Hey, thanks for cleaning up," or "I appreciate you, Mom, for what you did today. And thank you." It's those little things that begin to work here and affirm who we are as individuals that then gradually over time, as we continue to do that, it builds up that positive mentality. And then all of a sudden, we start believing that more and more ourselves. We start saying, "You know what? I actually did do a good job with that. Thank you." And then we can start affirming ourselves with that. So it has to fundamentally start at home. When we surround ourselves with people who are willing to call out the good that we do and not fester and poke over the little nuanced mistakes that we make, we'll be a lot more successful with this. So it does take a lot of time, though, when you go through, especially if you've been through something toxic in the workplace before, to rebuild and get yourself back up to a point where you've heard enough positive things from the people that surround you to where you can now implement it in the outside world. So I would say start at home, talk to your loved ones, speak to them, let them know, "Hey, you know what? I don't need to be told that that dress doesn't look right on me. Tell me that you like the color, or tell me, my hair looks good today." It's those little things that make a really big difference. And I hear so often from people where their spouses are not even nice to them and the children are ungrateful. But it's okay. It's okay as mom, it's okay as wife, and it's okay as husband to speak to your partners and say, "You know what? I need more support from you. and be vocal about those things. And it starts there. Your confidence begins at home, where you can vocalize that in home. If you can't do that in the safety of the four walls within your home, you'll never be able to do it on the outside. So once you do that, I call, this confidence factor, where there's a there's a stool with three legs approach, where you must have three sturdy legs on that stool. And if there's a fracture or a crack in one of those legs, you'll fall down. And so at home, if you've got the stability of somebody there, whether it's a mom, a dad, a brother, sister, a spouse, children, then you've got a lot of stability on that side. Then on the outside, you begin building and doing the hard work. So do you have a friend out there? That friend is not a good friend if they're not affirming you in what they do, right? So that third leg may be them. The second leg may be them. And then the third leg would be somebody out there in your network that can mentor and help you see areas of opportunity, blind spots, places that you need to really focus on and work on. So I think, again, going back, it's got to start at home. You've got to seek out that affirmation and begin telling yourself that you can. And then that will be what propels you to take the bold moves on the outside and in the work world.
Right. So I think the first thing what everyone, or maybe specifically women, needs to do is they need to communicate, right?
Mhm.
Right. And I think this is one challenge which I have seen with many women in around me. They keep a lot of things within themselves, right? And it's very difficult to speak up sometimes because they think that what if they feel someone other person feels bad? What if they just break relationship with me? What if this turns out to be a very bad situation? And just because of all of these questions, they just don't speak up, right? So what are some effective strategies of improving communication within the uh, a family, or maybe in the team as well? Because I know currently we're working in a work from home situation, right? Mostly people are working from home, they don't see each other a lot. There's a lot of communication gap. What are some effective strategies that people can immediately implement and see a little change? Slowly, they will still see the changes. But what are the strategies that can be easily implemented for anyone to communicate upfront and set that expectations from the family members as well as the team members, so that because that will help them grow as a leader?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and I hate to answer this with "it depends." But I will, because I think communication really hinges on who you're engaging with. Okay, so this is a very long conversation just on communication itself, but some basics, if I might, to just kind of encourage. You have to take interest.
Mhm.
And very fundamentally, when I'm working with individuals or groups, be curious. Be curious. Ask questions. One of the first things that we should look to do in communicating is not necessarily building a relationship, but you need to ask yourself, is the person or individual or team that I'm communicating with, is this a group or an individual people who are going to add value to me?
Mhm.
Are they going to be able to add value to me, and can I return value back to them? So it's understanding fundamentally the answer to that question, because then that will tell me how much to invest and
Right.
what types of levels of curiosity to put in. And so once I determine that, then it becomes an asking questions and a curiosity piece where I show interest in them. I find a way to connect with them. There's a lot of research out there that tells you that if you aren't able to connect with somebody within the first 90 seconds of the conversation, it's probably not going to be a value add relationship for you in the long run, anyways. So you need to look for that point of connection when you're communicating. I don't care if you're talking to your children at home or your spouse or your boss. It is, what is the commonality? What is there something that you can build off of? And then asking questions around it. And then also considering, okay, what's the value? Is it a return of value relationship? Because not all relationships are intended to return the same level of value back to you. So assess the value of the relationships, be curious, take an interest, and then when you're done, whatever length of interaction that is, say thank you. And so if you are showing gratitude for the time that you're with somebody, it goes a long ways and it touches their heart in such a way where they want to do it again. And so it really opens the door for your ability to continue the conversation. I always encourage people use names when you're speaking to individuals. Use their first name, because when you use their first name, it shows them you care. Well, one, you listened. And two, once you listened, you actually use their name repeatedly throughout the conversation to demonstrate that level of care that you've given to them. Ask them how you can serve them, things that you can do for them to help, again, with a means of bridging and helping to figure out what your value returned back to them can be for the time that they're giving you. So I think those are a handful of things I would say to encourage people. Again, there's a lot of conversation I get into around levels of organizations in particular when you're communicating and what's different about those. And again, it depends. But if I go in and I work with a business and I talk to the CEO, chances are he's a pretty important guy, right? And chances are he doesn't have a lot of time. So brevity might be something that you might want to practice. If you're a very verbose person, then considering your audience and again, considering the value that you want to get from them and you can return, they're going to consider it a lot more valuable if you're brief, succinct, and concise. So practicing communicating your thoughts in a very mature way that is succinct and to the point where it shows them you value their time will also go a long way. So I think those are some of the key things I would suggest on communicating. And again, it depends, but I think all of those things are able to be transferred between different individuals.
True. I think yeah, one of the important things which I see a lot in most of the leaders I have worked with is, and they were very vocal about it, right? That they don't have that much of confidence when they face a setback or failure, right? So how can a leader build and maintain a confidence in their abilities, especially when they face with setbacks or failures? What do you think?
This is a great one. And the first thing I would say in response to that is not to look at them as failures.
Mhm.
Maintaining confidence is crucial for leaders because if you waver and falter off of that and everybody sees it, it can deteriorate and diminish overall what people's perception is. So looking at it as a failure is probably the wrong way to look at it. You should always look at those as opportunities. So when we make mistakes, if I make a mistake in front of my children at home, I go, oh, how can mommy do this better? When I'm in the office, the first thing that I say is, gosh, what could I have done differently? How could I have done this better? It's an opportunity to not repeat and make the same mistakes over again. So rather than failures, I think that's the first thing I would tell people to do to maintain their level of confidence. Because the minute you start saying, I failed, I made a mistake, oh my gosh, it was so bad, you're going to start making a lot of assumptions over something that may not be real. A
Right.
lot of people may not even notice that you made the mistake, right? You're being very hard on yourself internally, making it extremely negative when it doesn't have to be. So I would reframe that and say it's an opportunity versus a failure or a mistake. Once you realize you've gone through something like this, you have to have a period of reflection, one where you sit back and you say, okay, we don't have to announce it to the world, but it's one of these things where we can just sit back and say, okay, let me think this through end to end and then come up with a plan for when that event occurs again. How do I navigate it differently? How do I do it better? Maybe I need to bring somebody along with me. Maybe I need to document something differently. Maybe I need to communicate and convey something differently. Whatever the situation may be, I reflect, I implement the change as a part of that opportunity to improve myself. Don't make assumptions on it, because if you make assumptions, it's going to create setbacks and it's going to create more negative thoughts and speak here, which are going to diminish your overall confidence overall.
Right.
Maintaining two other points here is maintaining that servanthood style of leadership is really, really important here, because if you are focused on serving others, then I would be challenged at thinking, how can you feel bad ever about that, right? So if you're serving others, it's always something positive that you should be giving out and deploying, right? So maintaining a servant mindset is really, really important. The last point here is always asking yourself, why? And making sure So to maintain your position on things and to maintain that level of confidence in what you're doing, make sure the why matches up with your purpose, and to ensure that you're working towards that objective that's going to satisfy your overall need to feel good. And so I think those are kind of the key points here to maintaining your level of confidence in a moment of setback or opportunity.
Right. I think you said very important thing. Understand the why. But I think it is important for a leader to have that clarity, right? What
Mm.
exactly they want. So how important clarity in leadership is, and like for example, what are some techniques leader can use to ensure that their vision and goal are clearly communicated to them as well as to others, right? So how important clarity is in leadership.
It's extremely important. Anybody that minimizes this shouldn't be a leader. Um, but there's one thing that comes to mind when I hear you ask that, and it's really just expectation setting. Um, making sure, again, doesn't matter who you're with, whether it's I told my children to clean their bedroom or I'm asking somebody in an office environment to go and fulfill something. You have to have a very clear objective for that person. And so setting a really clear expectation on, I need this from you. Here's why I need it from you. And here's why when we need it from you, because it's going to provide or propel our mission, our values, and move us forward to delivering what we're set out to do. And so it's stating it fully. If I just go say to my kids, hey, go clean your bedroom, but I don't tell them why I want them to clean their bedroom, it's going to fail every single time. They're going to keep playing video games, right? But if I tell my kids, hey, if you can clean your bedroom because it makes the house nicer, and when we're done, we can reward ourselves with pool time, they're more likely to go and do it. But you have to set a very clear expectation. No different in the work environment. If people know you're working towards something that's meeting your overall objectives and they can see the purpose behind what they're doing, and you are clear about that purpose up front, you'll be way more successful with them. So it's got to be clear. It's got to be set in an expectation with really some of those parameters in play.
Right. So I think, as per your what I understand is having a clear goal is very important. Like where do you want to be, and setting that expectations with your team members who are actually supporting you to achieve that goals, right? So what are the key elements of setting and achieving effective goals as a leader? Because you are leading a team, right? So the team is also supporting the similar goal. Because usually what happens when we get an organizational goals, it is cascaded down to the team level, right? So I have received a goal, maybe I have to cascade it down to my team members, right, who are reporting to me. So what what are the key elements of achieving these goals as a leader I should drive that it helps my team members to grow as well as myself to grow?
Okay. Yeah. So you must start foundationally at the objectives.
Yeah.
They must know and have very clear objectives on what you're targeting. Once the objectives are made clear, what's the purpose? Putting a value around those objectives is a must. So you must make clear the purpose, which is the why. Why are we doing something? The next thing that you must do is you must transcend that on all levels. You actually just said this. You need to transcend across all levels of engagement. So from the highest level to the lowest level and in everything in between, they must show that you are looking to them to contribute to those overall objectives and drive that overall purpose to the finish line. The final thing I would say is they got to see your commitment to it. They have to be able to see that you are invested in it. And I will say I've seen a lot of organizations struggle with this, where they're going through major transformation. But the only way transformation that's that size can be successful is leadership has to buy into it. So if you've got a major objective to transform your organization and one leader goes to his staff members and say, oh, this is the dumbest thing. I don't know why we're doing this. You've got a vulnerability out of the gates. So whether or not you disagree or agree with what the objectives are is really irrelevant. But what is relevant is the purpose, the why. Because if you see something that is being done that differentiates like where you are mentally with your values
Right.
and there's misalignment there, then I would say you've got a real problem. But as long as you can commit and it doesn't intervene or conflict with your personal values, and they can see that you're committed, they will commit along with you.
So I think it comes to motivating your team members, right? And with your mission and vision, right? So I know there are different styles of motivation, right? What, according to you, would be a best practice that a successful leader follow to inspire and motivate their team members consistently?
You must show accountability. Um, I mean, this is one of the oldest principles in the book, but you must show it. If you show and demonstrate it, it's respected. Show that you are always open to learning, that you don't know it all, and that you can be exposed to new principles. Seeking feedback is really, really important. Employees, everyone around you will be motivated if you ask them their opinion. Um, and so I think that's really important, but it also shows a level of vulnerability. I think one of the biggest attributes I look for in leaders is that they're okay being vulnerable.
Okay.
Sharing something with somebody that allows you to connect is extremely important as well. There's several other things here, like your ability to understand others, taking time to listen, listening to them. Um, One of the things I think we fail on a lot of times in corporate is not being advocates for our people. So if you're an advocate for them and you can support and stand behind the good work that they're doing and also praise it publicly is so important for leaders to do, and people will rally behind them if they do it. You could make all the mistakes in the book as a leader, but if you stand there and you give somebody a pat on the back,
Mhm.
they will still rally behind you and support you. So, there's things just like, empowerment, autonomy, allowing them to make, um, you know, errors and then allow them to learn and grow on it together, is also very important. So I think some of those tactics and techniques, I think, are key areas is what I would say would continue to motivate people, really listening,
Yeah.
connecting, understanding your people for sure.
I think one of the examples, or maybe one of the my past experiences is like, and what I follow is if I have any problem or any uh, disconnect with some team members within a team, if I'm in a meeting, I never talk about it with that team member in a meeting, right?
Mhm.
Instead, if I have something to appreciate about someone, I will make sure that I will speak in front of everyone, right?
Yeah.
But if I have some problem with someone that I didn't like the way or he or she is working, what I'll do, I set up a one-on-one with her or him, and then explain and then give a constructive feedback that, this is how it should be done. However, this was the outcome which I actually observed. So it's not like maybe giving them a critical feedback, but it's basically constructively working towards them that how we can do better than what they
Mhm.
have done. They've put effort. I appreciate that first, and then drive that conversation that how it should be done, because I know that putting someone else first is very important, and understanding why they have done that in first place, and if it was not done according to me, how it can be communicated in a better way, one on
Mhm.
one, not in front of everyone. So because if you talk to someone in front of everyone and you say that, hey, why did you do that, this was not supposed to be done like that, it builds a lot of negative relationship between you and the subordinates, right? So this is the practice which I think helped me build a strong relationship with my team members, and I think that's what I think everyone should follow. What is your take on that?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And you just said, I wrote down a couple of things when you were talking because there's two things, I think, or two words that I think people need to focus on eliminating from the vocabulary when they are talking in those one-on-one or group scenarios. One is why. Why did you do that? Why, do you think about this, if anybody's listening that has, kids, this is a really great example. Like if you're working with your kids, you say, why, they're immediately going to react very negatively. And then the other word is you. You this, you that. you made a mistake, or you didn't do this, or you. So why and you have a lot of negative connotation associated with them. And so it's amazing to have that much level of self-awareness, certainly to be able to take people separately out, because I know that there are people out there who don't, and they will do public shaming, which is atrocious. it is the one way to eliminate all positivity in a relationship that you may have pre-existing with somebody, is to do public shaming like that. So highly discouraged, and also encouraged to take that, isolate the situation, and speak very collaboratively on the situation, eliminating you and eliminating why from those discussion points, because they immediately come across as negative and attacking. And so the individual is going to always get in the defensive. So regardless of what your intentions are, it's just something that psychologically occurs within us that triggers that response to protect. So just be cautious of that. But otherwise, yes, it is the right thing to do. I also encourage in group settings, let's say there's more than one person in the group that contributed, right? I think certainly it's good practice to speak individually and then together, because you want to understand perspective. It's very, very important, to kind of get the stories of individuals and what and why they were thinking on how things occurred, so that you can then bring those perspectives together.
Right. Yeah, I think I've seen a lot of these kind of situations happening, and I think I felt that uh, uh, understanding why the person have done that, and then driving it in a positive way, collaborative way, the way you said it, right? So I think there are other things which also impact people to grow within a corporate environment, which is corporate politics.
Mhm.
Your take.
So I'm sorry, can you rephrase can we give me one more time?
So I have seen people talking about corporate politics. Uh,
Mhm.
restrict them to grow as a leader because they feel that they have done a lot of things towards achieving goals and things like that, but someone else is taking credit of it, or someone else is getting a lot of reward and recognitions instead of them because of corporate politics. What is your take on this? And how true this is, and how people can avoid or manage these situations and grow as a leader?
Okay, I want to make sure I heard you correctly. So, because what you just described, I lived through. And I had a scenario actually many years ago, just to share with your audience, that I worked in a very male-dominated industry. I was a senior executive in this organization, and I shared an idea at a roundtable discussion with a bunch of senior executives, and I was the only female in the room. And when I shared my idea, they dismissed it, they ignored it. And within just a few minutes, one of my counterparts, male colleague, says almost exactly the same thing that I said, and they applauded it and they recognized him for it. And I will say in that moment, and I still today, I won't say I'm scarred by it anymore, but I will say today, I think about it and I reflect on it, and what I could have done differently in that situation. And, I was a little early in my career, so I didn't have the confidence, certainly, that I needed put in me, that I do now. But when I think back on that moment, what I would have done differently is I would have absolutely advocated for myself. It's hard to do. It's a lot harder than it sounds to do that. And so in that moment, I could have said, that's the same thing I mentioned. Let's come back to my point and reflect on why. You accepted it here, but not here, and called it what it was. And so I think the challenge for me is in moments like that, I was immediately affected because my personal values were being shook. And I hadn't been in a situation like that before, where I felt so minimized and so little. And I think my advice for anybody in that situation is, if you feel as though the political aspect of a corporation is affecting you in a manner like that, it's only going to get worse. And it's going to deteriorate your confidence. It's going to put you in a place of mental instability where you don't feel like you're valued. And so my biggest advice is you have to assess the situation, assess the individuals, where it's coming from, assess the overall situation of where it surfaced, and decide, is this pervasive? Is it something that I should expect to continue to run into? And if it is, and it's a direct conflict to how you feel about yourself, your
Mhm.
values, and what you stand for, you must find a way to vacate from that. In that situation, there were options for me. I could have I could have reported it. I could have sought out other roles within the organization. I could have certainly left the organization if I wanted to. I could have also asked for somebody to have a mediated conversation and hit it head on. A lot of this takes a lot of confidence creation and confidence building, though, to do that. And so, what I ended up ultimately doing in the end, I got a mentor and I had somebody that helped me and advocated on my behalf because I didn't quite have the confidence that I needed at that point in time. So it's what you raise is it's a really unhealthy thing. It does certainly happen for sure, where we are met with those sorts of political battles. But I think an individual has to really look back and reflect and decide, is this the environment that I'm worthy of being in? And chances are, no, you need to be in something better. And so it's really reflecting on that and deciding, is that really where you want to be, or not? And the same thing is true at home. I've certainly dealt with family situations where a spouse may not be very kind to his wife. And so the question is, what do you do about that? What do you do about that? And you must stand up for your values, and your belief system and make sure that they're not being compromised. Because if they are, it's going to add a level of stress and anxiety, a lack of self-worth, and you're not going to truly be feeling the value that you need to have to feel good. So I don't know, does that answer sort of where you were trying to go?
It does, but I think I have a leading question there. When we have all these different kind of emotions impacting your growth, how much a network group or a support group is important at that point in time? What do you think about that? Like, should we think about joining these support groups which help us manage these situations? Because at that point of time, when I feel that there are a lot of emotions hitting me, I want to speak up,
Mhm.
but there is no one to listen. What is your thought about it? Like,
So I have lots of thoughts here. I'll share what a couple key things for me. First and foremost, before jumping in, if you don't have a support network and support group
mhm,
to go to, but you've got an individual, start with your closest individual, right? Start with them because they're going to be the ones, whether it's a best friend or a family member, colleague, spouse, whomever, they're going to be the first people who are going to empathize with you the easiest. And they're going to give you the courage that you need to keep building on that. At the same time, I do think support groups can be good. However, I'm very cautious about them. There's a lot out there. I don't, it depends on the network of community that you're part of, Facebook, Twitter, whatever it is, Instagram, what have you. There's so many different political or not political, social media places out there where you can go and solicit feedback. I will say I've heard a lot from different clients over time about them being full of toxic breeding ground as well. So I do say approach those with caution. Do your research, do your homework. I have a short example with myself where I have a father that I'm full-time guardian of, and he's suffering with dementia. And I've never been through that personally in my life before, and I didn't know how to deal with it. And so the first thing I did, I mean, of course, was I brought it home. I spoke to my husband about it. And what I realized quickly was it was introducing stress to him. It was, and so that wasn't fair. So I said, well, I need to take this somewhere. So I started looking for other outlets, local groups to my local groups to where I was. So, whether it's a church, a synagogue, or even social setting group where you can go where there is a support group locally, chances are you're going to find more positive advocacy in those groups to support your emotion. If that doesn't exist and you can't find that, then certainly you can go to these other external environments, like Facebook groups and such, where it's similar. And so I actually found both. I was very lucky to find a local group to actually go and talk to, and I immediately felt value from that because I could connect with people who were from similar walks of life, going through similar stories, and I could learn from them. Same thing was true when I went through a period of growth with that group. I took it, out into the social media world, and I connected with other groups out there. It can be toxic. So what I started doing first was monitoring conversations and seeing for myself, is this a good, healthy environment to be in? And there were some that I left. So I would say approach those with caution. I encourage people always to look locally, look at your area for these before venturing into the social media world for that, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is very important for everyone to understand when to take that decision to reach out, right? And to whom. That's very important because whenever I have self-doubt, I talk to myself sometimes because
Mm,
sometimes I have the question, what are you doing? Is it worth doing? How long you've been doing, but still it's not impacting. And what I do, I just go for a walk and I talk to myself.
mm,
So it's a long walk and I'm talking to myself, and then I realize that you are the only one who can help yourself first.
mm,
And I think while walking, I just get some just relief in terms of that anxiety, that stress which is building up of that self-doubt situation, right? And then maybe sometimes I call my friend. I have a very good friend, a childhood friend. I almost talk to him every day. It's basically when I go for a walk, I call him, and he never disconnects my call. Whenever I call him, twice a day I call him, he receives my call and we talk. So that kind of support group is very important. You have to find out those connections which can build your self-confidence and bring you out from those stress situations, right? I think, yeah, you've talked about it very nicely. So I want to understand about your coaching thing. So what framework do you follow specifically for confidence building people?
uh,
So, because I feel that uh, there are so many people who do not even know that they have a confidence problem. How do you
mm.
validate that? And what kind of clients do you uh, have you seen since you've started your coaching journey?
Yeah. So I see a lot of different clients for different reasons, but confidence is always one of the first things that seems to be kind of a vice for people. You either have it or you don't. And, I do see people who think they're confident when they're really not confident. They're not willing to take the necessary steps that they need in their journey to get where they need to be. So there's a missing element to it. Some people are naturally confident, but then there's an edge where it becomes cocky. And it's really not confidence. It's more of just a high ego that's going on. So one of the first things that I do, and I don't work with just anybody. I tend to I want to connect with a client. So before I take on any clients, I really got to understand what's their walk of life, where they come from, what's their personal values and mission, what are they after, to determine, is this somebody that's even ready for coaching? Because it's not for everybody. And most people actually don't even understand it. But one of the first things I try to assess is their personality, their behavior. So for me, it is a must in building confidence with somebody is to understand what I consider their style. So every individual has kind of a behavioral style that we exude. And so as a public speaker and coach and trainer, I'm what we call a high I individual. And so what that means is there's there's four levels of behavior, and I stand in the one where we like to kind of be center stage and we exude confidence and we can communicate and speak. And then you've got people who are dominant people,
Mhm.
um, who may have confidence, but it also may be a lot of cockiness. And so then you've got your what I call steady eddies. These are the people who just kind of, this is the majority of people in the population. They kind of keep even keel, motor along at kind of what's status quo for them, right? They don't challenge a whole lot, but they speak up when they need to. This is usually where a lot of people they will look for confidence. They'll seek out confidence and they'll say, how can I be a better public speaker? And then there's this other extreme of people where they're kind of what we call compliance people. They're the rule followers. And I tease my husband sometimes because he's one of these people that does everything in spreadsheets. He's got a plan and organized in spreadsheets. But he came to me a few years ago and he's like, well, how do I grow myself in leadership? How do I get there? Well, you got to get out of the spreadsheets. You got to get out of the spreadsheets. And so the first thing I do to help people understand where they need to do, where they need to be to build their confidence to get where they want to go is we do something called a DISC assessment. So it's DISC. And it's a really popular behavioral assessment, but I'm certified and trained to teach in this, administer, and then debrief people on these. And the reason I do this is because I want to understand where they are. I want to get their baseline first. And once I understand their baseline, then it's talking to the individual, understand where they want to be. And from where they want to be, we determine where their blind spots are. So then we have to assess what's blind spot for them. And then we figure out kind of a goal assessment to get them to where they want to be. And there's lots of things that I do depending on where you fall in that spectrum on the behavioral style to determine what we need to do to be that. Now, I mean, it spans everything from negative, eliminating negative self-talk. I see this very common with people that are in that steady Eddie or compliant type of a bucket in DISC, where they don't really know how to be confident necessarily in all circumstances. And so they're the ones who might shy away from presentations. They're not quite sure how to be or present themselves. And so it's generally, a lot of confidence building and creation that has to occur there. And it's self-image work, quite honestly. Sometimes people will tell me they just don't like how they sound. And so it's really just assessing where they are and then looking at the blind spots, and then we isolate specific goals to bridge the gaps for them. I have this one scenario, and I think I've shared it a lot, where for me to overcome my fear of public speaking and stage fright, which I did have, I remember a period of time when I was very young, I actually threw up on the side of the stage. That's how scared I was to go out. And for me to overcome that, one of the things that I do, and it's going to sound silly to many or most people, is before I do that, I always will go and I'll look whether I'm getting here and I'm going to the bathroom and I'll look in the mirror at myself and I'll put on some sort of superhero pose in front of the mirror and imagine myself as that powerful hero, right? Like, I can do this. And then you start all of a sudden seeing a change in how you carry yourself. You might come in, your shoulders are back. Oh, I can do that. And so you have a different presence about yourself. And so there's techniques and tactics like that that I work with people on to help them isolate what they can do, create a behavior, a change of thinking and thought process to begin maintaining and building on that confidence. So it's got to start with behavior. Once we do that, blind spots, and then it's factoring in some objectives in between and some techniques in between. So it's going to vary depending on the style and where their baseline is.
Right. So for a straight question, if someone wants to reach out to you, how do they reach out to you? Like, is there a website where people can reach out, or are you available on social media? What are your social media handles which they can reach out to? What is the way to reach out to you?
Of course, sure. And I'd be delighted to speak to anybody. I am certainly reachable on social media. I have both a Facebook, Instagram page, and I'm on LinkedIn as well. I do have a private website that I also run. It's just www.nancymouellette.com. So it's NANCYMOUELLETTE.com. And honestly, if people want just like a quick onesie twosie thought, question, or feedback, they're welcome to reach out anytime on Facebook Messenger or LinkedIn messaging and just ask. I'm highly personable and I'll never turn down a conversation. So open to that if anybody would like to reach out for sure.
Yeah, I think anyone, if you want to reach out to Nancy, if you have any questions that how do you want to grow as a leader, if you don't know whether you have that confidence level or not, if you have any questions regarding that, reach out to Nancy. She's available on LinkedIn. I would recommend message her on LinkedIn and then initiate a discussion because I think she is available there. easily because that's how I reached out to her. And I messaged her that why don't you come on the podcast and give your valuable experience of life and share with people who are going through a lot of challenges in their corporate environment as well as their personal life, right? So I would recommend that reach out to her if you have any questions, take suggestions, guidance from her. And I'm sure that if you want to grow as a leader, if you want to understand how to build confidence within you, uh, that is the best step for you to reach out to Nancy. And I really appreciate Nancy for giving your time today and coming on this podcast. I really, really appreciate that. And one last thought, if you want to give one recommendation to anyone to implement certain things that can build some sort of confidence within them, what is that one thing you would recommend to anyone?
One thing, wow. There's one thing that I would suggest for, so I think one of the best, easiest, quickest ways that I would suggest if you're looking to build confidence is stop telling yourself you can't.
Okay.
Turn all of your can'ts into cans. I wills instead of won't. It's really some say it's a mind trick, but quite honestly, it's the easiest way to start flipping that script and
Mhm.
stop talking so negatively to yourself. And we start saying you can more, you'll say can't less.
Right. So you heard that. You have to say, I will, I can, instead of I won't, I can't. Right. So, and I think this is one thing which you can implement immediately to see results, not bigger results, but yeah, I think it's a good way to start with your confidence building journey. Right. And I think once you build the confidence, your leadership journey will start because confidence is first step of leadership, I would say. And I think thank you, Nancy, for joining today. I really appreciate you giving us your time. And I think, yeah, thank you very much. You have a great day.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Yeah, Nancy. Bye bye.